MZTV.
You may have asked yourself this question, but if you haven't, I will ask it for you. Why is the tribulation so intense, so brutal? I mean, there's no reason for me to review for you the bowls and the lightnings and the trumpets, the seals that are broken, and the traumas that will come upon this earth. I mean, the sun scorching humanity, and the locusts, and the blood, and the killing, the water turning to blood, a third of humanity killed. You may ask yourself, as any normal person would, why? My God, why is this as intense, as brutal as it is? And there is a reason for it, because we are coming upon an unprecedented time in the Eonian times. I'm not talking about the tribulation now. I'm talking about why the tribulation is so intense, so brutal. It's not just that we are at the crisis point between Eon 3 and Eon 4. Now, I'm going to do just a very broad overview of the eons. There are 5 eons. Our calendars have 30 squares or 31 squares, or February, which has 28, so a leap year gives it 29. God's calendar has 5 squares. He is working in these vast time periods called eons, and there are 5 eons. We are perched at the brink of Eon 4. Eon 4 is going to be the kingdom eon, the 1,000-year kingdom on earth. Paul calls this present eon, he calls it the present wicked eon in Galatians 1, verse 4. But not only are we looking at the end of Eon 3, the beginning of Eon 4, it's very rare for human beings to be at this place in the Aeonian times where you live through a transfer of eons. In fact, to date, only 8 people have ever straddled an eon, and that was the 8 people on the ark. They boarded the ark in Eon 2, and they came out of the ark in Eon 3. To date, only 8 people have straddled an eon. Do you remember how weird it felt when 1999 turned to 2000, right? The millennium, the new millennium. You felt like you were riding a wave from one era to another era. Well, that is what it's like to go from one eon to another eon. And as I said, to date, only 8 people have done it. But there will be many people who will ride the wave from Eon 3 to Eon 4. But it's not just that. Because not only are we going from one eon to another, but we are going from the evil eons to the good eons. I'm Martin Zender. Welcome to the end of the week. This is MZTV. Happy to be serving the saints every day in this capacity. Thankful to God every day for this job, and that you're out there watching, and we're all learning together. If you look at the 5 eons, 3 are dark, 3 are evil, and 2, the last 2 eons, are finally the time periods when God gets glory. This is why you see the phrase, "To God be glory for the eons of the eons." Galatians 1:5, speaking of the will of our God and Father, to whom be glory for the eons of the eons. Paul here is referring to the last two eons. He's comparing eons to other eons. He's comparing the last two eons to the entirety of the eons. And you'll find this phrase, to whom be glory for the eons of the eons. God does not get glory for all the eons, because the first eon was wrecked by the disruption. The second eon was wrecked by the flood of Noah. This third eon is going to be wrecked by the tribulation. And finally, on the Aeonian calendar, God is going to get glory that he hasn't gotten heretofore. He is not, especially not in this eon. God pretty much goes unrecognized. He's been hiding himself for the better part of 3 eons. But finally, in eons 4 and 5, to God be the glory for the eons of the eons. Also, Romans 16:27, to the only and wise God, through Christ Jesus, be glory for the eons of the eons. King James completely botches this translation, as does the other common English translations. They say forever and ever. Forever and ever is one of the stupidest translations you will ever see of the phrase eons of the eons. Not only do they ignore the plural, where do you see any plural in forever and ever, but they put the connective there, kai, K-A-I, and, but it's not there in the original Greek. It's the genitive case of the nouns, the eons of the eons. They completely ignore, the Common English versions completely ignore this beautiful construction. And there are other distinctive phrases, the eons of the eons, the eon of the eons, and the eon of the eon, all these beautiful distinctions. And the King James and other English translations, they translate every single one of them forever and ever. As I said, they ignore the plural, they ignore the genitive case, and they put the connective kai in there, and when it's not even in the text. So they have no clue what God is saying, and you are robbed of these beautiful distinctions of eons. So God is going to get glory for the last 2 eons. I consider this like the weekend of the Aeonian times. Upcoming is the weekend of the Aeonian times. So not only, you have to understand now you understand, I hope. I'm just giving you a brief glimpse of the epicness of where we are. It's like you're at the mall and you see those maps. You are here, you are here. We are perched right at the edge. But again, it's not, I keep saying this, but I want you to get this. It's not just the end of one eon and the beginning of another. It's the end of the evil eons and the beginning of the good eons. This is spectacular where we are. It is spectacular. But because this transfer of evil to good is so great and it's been so looked forward to, and it has been so many years coming, not just from the time of Adam, but from the creation of the heavens and the earth, from the creation of the Aeonian times themselves, God has been looking forward to this pivot point. It's a pivot point. And it is the greatest relief of the entire Aeonian time. So we're on the edge of that as well. So you would have to expect that the events on the earth that will inaugurate, I should say, that will end this, the reign of evil. Because it was evil that caused the disruption of the world that ended Eon 1. It was evil that caused Noah's flood that ended Eon 2. And it's evil of this third eon, the eon that crucified Christ, it's going to end Eon 3. And finally, God says, and now, ladies and gentlemen, the weekend. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, says God, the eons where I am going to actually get glory. It's not that he hasn't gotten any glory, but he gets glory from a smattering of people to whom he puts his spirit, to whom he gives his spirit, and we acknowledge him. But just look at Noah's day. 8 people acknowledged God. That was kind of depressing for God. God's saying, boy, I can't wait till these evil eons, because I can get these in the history book. So God has been working to get these 3 evil eons in the history book. So finally, a corner can be turned. This is what we're on the brink of, the turning of a corner of massive proportions, massive consequences. The change cannot be overemphasized. And the fact that we are here at this crisis point, at this tipping point, at this corner, at this juncture, at this joint, where everything now changes. Of course, there was change between Eon 1 and 2, and between Eon 2 and 3. But this change, from the evil eons to the good eons, make those changes look like Wednesday turning to Thursday, Friday turning to Saturday, just a normal change. 1999 turning to 2000. Ooh, boy, remember that was supposed to be a Y2K, big worldwide disaster. Didn't happen, thank God, okay? But this. And so I say this so that you will not be shocked at what it is going to happen at this joint, at this juncture, at this corner. It's going to be intense. And that is why. It's even more intense than the days of Noah, because it's 3.5 years. Noah's flood was an hour, and everybody was dead. This is 3.5 years, protracted pain and suffering and birth pangs, Jesus compared it to. So you have to expect this. Now, where were you on August the 8th, 1969? I know exactly where I was, and I'm going to show you where I was right now. Yep, I was in London, England with the Fab Four, also known as the Beatles. They invited me across the pond. They heard I was a percussionist, and they were working on their last album. And they asked me to join in, and I said, you're kidding, right? No, we're not kidding. Come on over. So I came over, and this is not the iconic photograph, but we were sitting in the studio one day after recording. I played the tambourine on Mean Mr. Mustard and Polythene Pam, so that's me. They asked me to just chip in a little bit. I was more than happy to do it. And I did the hand claps on Here Comes the Sun. Me and John and George Martin, we did the hand claps for. So I was just thrilled to be able to. I mean, how many people can say they contributed to a Beatles track? I contributed to 3. Here Comes the Sun, Me and Mr. Mustard, and Polythene Pam. So, but that was like July 30th. They called me around the 25th of July. They were finishing up the album. They needed some percussion. They'd heard I was a percussionist. I said, I'll be there. I wouldn't miss this for the world. So we're sitting around after those recordings, and they've been wondering what to do for the cover of this album. And they had some really highfalutin ideas. They were going to go to Mount Everest, or they were going to go to Athens, to the ruins in Athens. But somebody it was Paul, in fact, it just said, why don't we just walk across the road? And we all immediately said, yeah, why not? It'd be a lot cheaper. I said that. And I said, well, you can save a lot of money doing this. I said, well, you guys go out there. I'm going to watch out the window for sure. And they said, no, Mark, no, we want you to be in it. You want me to be in it? No, this is about you guys. This is not about me. Come on, Audi. Come on, let's go. You're in it. So I went out. And so I got in on one of the photographs. It's a great keepsake. This was not the final one. Obviously, I'm not in the final one, but I am in this one. But as I was looking at this print later, I said that this is an amazing, especially with me there, this is an amazing picture of the Aeonian times. Look at this. I want you to notice how many. I don't know how to put the screen up here and show you like on the screen while it's happening. I can't do any motion things. I don't know how to do any of that stuff. It's probably simple, but I don't know how to do it. But anyway, I want you to look at this because I noticed this and it was so interesting. How many squares of sidewalk crossing do you see? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5. The 5 eons. And look at the center of the road, the dotted white line there, the broken white line. It's coming right in between Ringo and Paul. And it's separating John and Ringo from me, Paul, and George. So I thought, this is the eons. This is a map of the eons. We have George, me, and Paul as the first 3 eons, and you can see we're on the first 3 blocks of pedestrian paint, whatever you want to call it. And then Ringo and John are past the center line. They're into the eons of the eons, which I call on this chart the weekend. So this is the Aeonian road. And you can see here that I have a chart above this. You can cut and paste this and study it. This is great. At the beginning, you see in the green there, God was all in himself. And then he created the eons through Christ. Hebrews chapter 1, verses 1, 2, and 3. There was Eon 1 was a pristine earth, and then there was a disruption. The disruption of the world created by the Elohim were the heavens and the earth became a chaos and vacant. Wasn't made that way. And that brought about Eon 2. You will notice that in between each eon is a great cataclysm. Eons do not end peacefully. They go hard. They go really hard. So the second eon also brought about a second earth, because at first earth was destroyed by the disruption of the world. So then that's the second earth. There's a flood of Noah. That ends Eon 2, which brings us into Eon 3, which I have black here. You notice it goes from light gray to darker gray to black because these eons get more wicked as they go. They're all nasty, but they get nastier with progress, if you want to call it progress. It is progress in the revelation of God because we need the contrast in order to get to the Ringo and John Aeonian weekend, which is coming. The reason I have the cross there in the middle of Eon 3 is because this is Hump Day. Now, I'm going to read an amazing passage to you from, I'm going to go back to the chart here, but right now I'm going to go to Hebrews chapter 9, verse 26. Yet now, once at the conclusion of the eons, for the repudiation through his sacrifice is he manifest. Wow, look at that. Jesus Christ was manifest once at the conclusion of the eons. In other words, the eons began concluding when Jesus Christ came. So back to the chart. That's why I call this Hump Day. The middle of Eon 3 is Hump Day. That's when Christ came, and that's when the eons began to conclude. And look at the symmetry. You have the centerpiece of the Ionian times is the cross of Christ. And then you have the 2.5 eons before that and 2.5 eons after it. And we're in the 2,000 years subsequent to the crucifixion of Christ, and we are right at the door of the indignation. But ladies and gentlemen, that is going to inaugurate the kingdom eon, which is the first of the eons in which God gets glory. And of course, we know the kingdom eon ends with combustion. The earth is combusted with fire. Peter gives us that great news. And then there's a new heavens and a new earth. Look at all the verse references there. I don't have time to go through all of them, but they are there for your perusal. And then we have the consummation of the eons, taught by Paul in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 26. We're really, the great 1 Corinthians 15 passage of Scripture goes from 1 Corinthians 15:22 to 1 Corinthians 15:28. And then we have God all in all, 1 Corinthians 15:28. So we have God all in himself before the Ionian times. God creates the eons in order to have fellowship and in order to create a framework of time in which he can reveal himself, and he reveals himself against a backdrop of evil. So we have to have these evil eons. It's necessary, just like the blood sacrifices were necessary. God did not delight in the blood of bulls and goats, and yet he had to do it to set the stage for a revelation of his son. Likewise, these first three wicked eons is God laying the foundation of contrast. The foundation of contrast in order to display his glory in the eons to come. That's why the first eon is yellow. The second eon is, I don't know what you would call this color, olive green. Should have made it hot pink. Olive green. Not too crazy about that color as I sit here with you today. But anyway, so you can see where we are in the middle of Abbey Road here. John and Ringo are in the eons of the eons. You can see the 2 blocks of pedestrian paint there. Poor Paul and George and myself were still back in the evil eons, but that's all right. We're just playing our part. This is a helpful chart, I think, to show the Aeonian times. So send this to your friends. And you can tell them that you know Martin Zender, who is actually at Abbey Road Studios to help the Beatles record their final album. It wasn't the final album released. Let It Be was actually released later than Abbey Road, but Let It Be was recorded before Abbey Road. They wanted me to come for Let It Be, but I couldn't. I had a conference during that time. I can't make it, fellas, but they didn't give up on me, fortunately, so I got to play a part in history here. But the real history, the important history, is the history of the eons. Let's get away from analyzing our 31 squares, our 12 months. We're just so obsessed with the minute, troubling, disquieting details of life, and let's raise the viewpoint and look at things the way God sees them, in the perspective of these vast and great eons. And look where we are, and look what's coming. So you would have to expect that there is going to be much trauma, but it's the last of the horrible trauma, really. I mean, it's not that we're still going to have the Great White Throne, of course, and the Lake of Fire, but as far as this protracted period of human suffering and the barrage of God bringing his judgment so that the inhabitants of the world can learn righteousness, this is a singular moment on the Aeonian calendar, and we are here to witness it, just like I was there at Abbey Road Studios to witness and to participate in the recording of this great album. So what a gift God has given us, to not only be placed at this great juncture of the Aeonian times, but to be members of the body of Christ. And even more astounding is it really all begins with our snatching away. Our snatching away is the event that begins the kickover. It begins the transfer. This is incredible. From the evil eons to the good eons. I mean, for this, who is competent? And yet God makes us competent.